So welcome everyone. We are so grateful to have all of you here today and thank you for your patience. We're going to begin the listening session momentarily, but first I wanted to provide some brief introductions and share a couple of housekeeping items. So first, automated live transcription and closed captions have been enabled for this session, and you can turn them on using the control at the top of your screen. Secondly, if you have any technical or logistic questions throughout the session, please feel free to drop them in the chat and one of our team members will be happy to support you. Third, and finally, I wanted to introduce myself to all of you. My name is Fumi Chinekezi. I'm a program officer at the National Academy of Medicine, working on the Grand Challenge on Climate Change, Human Health, and Equity, also known as the Climate Grand Challenge. I'm so excited to be discussing the Climate Communities Network with you all today, which is a new initiative under the Climate Grand Challenge. I am joined by my colleague, Grace Robbins, an associate program officer on the team, who also supports the Climate Communities Network. We are also honored and delighted to have Dr. Victor Zhao, president of the National Academy of Medicine, with us today to open the session. And so with that, I will hand it off to Dr. Zhao.
Thank you very much, Fumi, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you heard, my name is Victor Zhao. I'm the president of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine. And I'm here today to publicly announce for the first time and to ask for your support and insight in shaping a new initiative within the National Academy of Medicine, the Climate Communities Network. I want to give you some background about why we're doing this. Can I have the next slide, please? First of all, it's all about people. This slide, which I find very helpful, is to remind us that we hear about well-being of people, young and old, and of course, climate affects human health and well-being in a big way. I always find it interesting that when people talk about climate change, I may see a polar bear on a slab of ice, or they say it's future generation. But what I want to tell you is it's happening right now, affecting us. Next slide. So this slide shows you the climate impact on health. In other words, when you look at the top, which are the effect of carbon dioxide emission and climate pollutants, it causes climate change. Then rising temperature, rising sea level, extreme weather events, and impacts community depending on their socioeconomic environmental background, which I'll talk about later. But important, if you look at what happens is, in the bottom of the slide, is that it can cause cardiovascular death, asthma, respiratory disease, injuries and fatalities and mental health issues, infectious disease, vector-borne disease, malnutrition, and of course, forced migration. Next slide. Actually, most people don't know this. It's really a true public health crisis because 20 million deaths per year globally are due to factors related to climate change, like air pollution, vector-borne disease. You know, with warming, global warming, those vectors, mosquitoes are going north and bringing along with malaria, dengue fever. And if you look at COVID-19, you can argue it's also an effect of climate change because of deforestation, urbanization, animals much closer to men, what they call zoonosis. And you know what happened. COVID-19 has caused more than 6 million deaths. Food and water supply. Children died because no access to safe water, malnutrition, stunning, and of course, many other disasters. And as I said, forced migration. Huge number of people are climate refugees everywhere in the world. Next slide. In case you don't think it's happening to us, this is the US map. This map comes from Medical Society Consortium, mapped the climate events to different parts of the United States, and you can see it's everywhere. We're not, in fact, immune from this. And what you see in the data here is asthma, respiratory disease related to climate air pollution, 150,000 deaths a year. You know, the extreme weather, the heat strokes and deaths in America, the injuries and fatalities, mental health, suicide rates increase, and of course, the economic toll is as big as $820 billion annually. This is a significant problem for us. That's why we're involved with this issue. Next slide. But what's important to know is that it doesn't affect everybody equally. This slide shows you, if you look at the upper right and up, down, lower left, older adults and children are disproportionately affected. Heat strokes, power outages, extreme events, particularly vulnerable in the older population who don't have as much mobility and living in poor conditions, and younger children. But also importantly, if you look at the upper left and lower right, is communities of color. Low-income communities are particularly disproportionately affected. Let me give you some examples. Next slide. So now this is on environmental justice, but as you know, environmental injustice, climate change overlap in a big way. So let me talk about them as examples. Everyone knows about Katrina. We saw that in television vividly. So affected people, and particularly affected people who live in poorer areas closer to the water. And we've all seen this. But in South Bronx, in the neighborhood of Mott Haven, it's called Asthma Alley. Why? Because they live close to a warehouse where thousands of trucks go by every day, and also live close to Wall Street Journal, printing process, and there's so much air pollution that in fact the asthma rate is so much higher, 3-4 times higher than the others, but 97% of people who live in this area are Black. So you can imagine what this is. This is pollution inequity. Let me skip down to Cancer Alley. This is in fact along Mississippi between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, where there's a lot of petrochemicals, and this toxic petrochemicals causing cancer in this way. And there again, people who live in those areas are in fact poor and communities of color. So I think we all recognize communities are being affected, and certain communities are more disproportionately affected. And the reason why we want to bring you together is to address this issue. Next slide. So a few years ago, we decided this is such an important issue for the Academy that we want to create this as a grand challenge. Take it on as a big issue to involve everybody, like you, people in the audience today, like the government, like the private sector. So this, in fact, is called Climate Change, Human Health, and Equity. And as you can see, we have 5 different areas we're working on. One is communication. Let the world know this is a real crisis. People don't quite realize that, but when they realize this is affecting their health, like COVID, they may be willing to a lot more ready to act. Second is create, number 2, you can see that, a roadmap, in fact, a report to say how can we change the systems that affect climate and health. That includes food, agriculture, transportation, energy, you name it. Third is to work hard to decarbonize the US health sector. Hospitals, manufacturers emit 8.5% of US carbon emission, believe it or not, in the health sector. So we have an obligation to do this. And then, of course, research innovation. But what you see here is the cross-cutting issue, which is communities. You matter. We want to make sure that you have a voice at the table. We want to make sure we serve well by you. And in fact, it's well known, if you look at globally, the poor countries emit the least, but have the biggest impact by climate change, when the rich countries emit the most, but have resources to mitigate. We feel the same way about the United States, and that's why we want to have all of you work with us to address this issue. I think that may be my last slide. Let me see. Next. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to Grace and Fumi, who's going to tell you about why we put this network together, what we hope that we can engage you to do, and let's do something useful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhao, for those remarks and for welcoming us to the session. So now we will begin to talk about the Climate Communities Network and just dig a little deeper into our rationale. So we've heard many things from Dr. Zhao, and we recognize that the combined intersecting impact of both climate change and structural racism has contributed to and exacerbated health inequities among historically and currently marginalized communities in the US. We recognize these communities are often not equitably engaged as partners in the related research, policy intervention, and funding decisions that affect their community's health. And so we want to reverse that dynamic. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Climate Communities Network. The network will endeavor to engage and center the expertise of communities in areas that are disproportionately impacted by climate change to address health inequities. The network will have two primary goals. One is to inform the strategic direction and outcomes of the Climate Grand Challenge, as well as work collaboratively to identify and develop solutions to climate-related health inequities. Next slide. So before we officially begin talking about the Climate Communities Network, we will be starting with a brief interactive exercise. And so if you are able to, on your phone or computer, please follow the instructions on the slide to respond to the question, when you think about climate change right now, how do you feel? Tell us in one word. And so as you type in and submit your responses, they will populate the slide and create a word cloud. So we'll give it a few minutes for people to access the activity and submit their words. So the responses are rolling in. Seems like concerned is a big one. Yes, that definitely resonates. Yep, urgent, anxious, hopeful. Hopeful is a good one. Overwhelmed. Yes, this is a very complex issue. These are really powerful words, and it seems like a lot of you feel a sense of urgency and concern and even hope and motivation. And all of it resonates. This is definitely a complex issue, and we want to build on that and channel this passion with the Climate Communities Network. Next slide, please. Now I would like to walk us through the agenda for today. So Grace and I will provide an overview of the Climate Communities Network, including the vision and impact, key players, member recruitment and selection approach, and launch timeline. And then we will have designated time to hear from all of you during our discussion and feedback portion. And finally, we will close out with some key takeaways and next steps. Next slide. So as has been shared, the primary purpose of today's session is to hear your feedback so that your expertise, insights, and perspectives can shape and improve our current plans for the Climate Communities Network. There are multiple ways that you can contribute, and we welcome you to share in whatever way feels most comfortable for you. We're going to reiterate this in more detail later, but for now, we definitely wanted to let you all know that when we get to the discussion portion of the session, you are welcome to raise your Zoom hand and share verbally or drop questions and comments in the Zoom chat. Throughout this session, we welcome you to contribute in the Zoom chat as well as use Zoom reactions if possible. And finally, after the listening session, we will be sending all of you a survey that will give you an opportunity to share additional feedback. Next slide. So with that, let's dive into the presentation, starting with our vision for and our anticipated impact of the Climate Communities Network. Next slide. Our vision statement is drafted as follows. We envision a society that equitably prioritizes and protects the health of all communities from the threats of climate change. It is our intention that through the work of the Climate Communities Network, we can move towards making this vision a reality. Like all aspects of our plans, this vision statement is a draft. It will be iterated and finalized in collaboration with the network members once they've been selected. Next slide. In terms of the network's impact, these are some potential focus areas as well as examples of the kind of work that the network might rally around to advance that vision. We can see ourselves supporting the network on issues related to policy, funding, research and data, and capacity building. For policy, the network could help broaden and deepen opportunities for community input on federal, state, and local policies that impact climate and health equity. In terms of funding, the network could catalyze more equitable and community-driven investments and innovative funding models that affect climate and health equity. For research and data, the network could play a role in collecting, sharing, and applying more representative and context-specific data to inform culturally appropriate climate and health solutions. And for capacity building, the network could help increase knowledge and use of environmental justice tools and resources among communities that are most impacted by climate change. Overall, an anticipated impact of the network is that its collective work will elevate the invaluableness of community expertise and wisdom, as well as the fact that those communities directly affected by any issue should be the ones driving the solutions to those issues. Not only those issues, but also the decisions that stand to improve and protect their community's health. Next slide, please. So in order to facilitate these impacts, the National Academy of Medicine is committed to a number of things. One, elevating community-driven efforts to address climate-related health inequities. We're committed to convening the network regularly to share challenges, solutions, best practices, and accomplishments. Engaging network members directly and as equal partners in all climate grand challenge work streams. And last but not least, leveraging our platform to foster relationships between network members and large-scale organizations to expand access to resources for community-identified priorities. Next slide. So now that we've discussed the vision and impact of the network, as well as NAM's commitment to its success, let's dive a little bit deeper into who will actually make up the network. Next slide. So the Climate Communities Network will involve two primary groups of key players, the members and strategic partners. We will be expanding on the roles of each key player group in a bit, but generally, the members will be a core group of community leaders working for community-based organizations and identified through an application process. They will work with one another, strategic partners, and the NAM to advance community priorities on climate-related health inequities. At this time, we are planning to select up to 12 members. Complementary to our core group of members, we will be inviting relevant governmental and non-governmental organizations across various sectors to serve as strategic partners. Strategic partners will provide guidance to NAM staff, as well as support and resources for network members. At this time, we are planning to invite up to 8 strategic partners. Next slide. So in order to be eligible to be a network member, we have 2 baseline qualifications that must be met. The member must work for a community-based organization in an area that is disproportionately impacted by climate change. And aligned with the network's potential focus areas, these community-based organizations must be focused on addressing climate-related health inequities through policy, funding, research and data, capacity building, and/or advocacy interventions. And so while these are not required qualifications, you'll see on the slide here that we do have a number of preferred qualifications. So it is preferable that the member lives in the same community that their organization serves, that the member and their organization have experience planning and implementing community-based solutions to climate-related health inequities, that the member and their organization have experience working with diverse community partners on issues of climate and health justice, and that the member and their organization have the capacity to effectively reach and communicate with community members. Essentially, the individuals who are selected to be network members will be operating in a dual capacity as representatives of their organization and community residents. Next slide, please. So as previously mentioned, the strategic partners will be the second key player group within the network, complementary to the members. The strategic partners will have expertise that spans multiple various fields, including, but not limited to, academia, federal and local government, philanthropy, public health, and the private sector. They will be well positioned to leverage their organizational platform to enable access to information and resources that can further the priorities expressed by network members. Strategic partners will have a vested interest in health equity and community engagement, and an appreciation for how health inequities are exacerbated by climate change. Collectively, strategic partners will bring multi-sectoral expertise, the ability to facilitate connections and partnerships with and for members, as well as the ability to advise NAM staff. We are currently developing a short list of strategic partners, which will be finalized in partnership with the network members once they've been selected. Next slide. So now shifting a little bit to Climate Communities Network expectations. So collectively, we expect members and strategic partners to participate in the network for at least 12 months, to actively engage in regular network meetings to inform the strategic direction and outcomes of the Climate Grand Challenge, and to work collaboratively to identify and develop solutions to climate-related health inequities. We expect them to serve as liaisons between their respective organizations and communities and the NAM to facilitate bi-directional communication and learning. And we expect them to participate in evaluation activities so that we can assess the network's impact. An additional expectation of members is the co-development and implementation of a network work plan to advance the network's goals. While this plan will be spearheaded by the members, they will have the full support of NAM staff, as well as the support of the strategic partners. Though this program has an initial 12-month period, we anticipate that this will be an ongoing initiative of the Climate Grand Challenge, continuing beyond 2023. Next slide. So by participating in the network, both members and strategic partners will benefit from access to forums for learning, networking, and collaborating with peers and other experts, increased visibility of their organization's work, opportunities to advance policy, funding, and other interventions identified by communities and aligned with community priorities, and then opportunities to inform and advance the priorities and efforts of national initiatives, including but not limited to the Climate Grand Challenge. Given the additional level of commitment expected of members, as I mentioned on the previous slide, members will also be compensated financially for their participation. Next slide. And so now I will turn it over to my colleague, Grace Robbins, to talk a little bit more about member recruitment and selection, as well as our launch timeline.
Thank you so much, Fumi. As Fumi mentioned, I'll be giving a high-level overview of our member recruitment and selection approach in this next section. This approach is being guided deeply by our collaboration with the University of Maryland Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health. Under the leadership of Dr. Sakobi Wilson, the team at University of Maryland, or UMD, is producing a series of deliverables. First, the team is producing a literature review and synthesis that will help us identify U.S. regions and populations disproportionately impacted by climate change impacts and direct and indirect health effects. Second, the team is conducting a mapping exercise using climate and environmental justice indicators from national screening tools that will help us identify areas in the U.S. that are differentially impacted by climate change. Third and finally, the team is drafting a series of case studies highlighting innovative and ongoing examples of community-driven actions and solutions to address climate impacts and their attending health inequities. Taken together, we anticipate that these deliverables will help us do three things. First, that they will help us focus our promotion and outreach so that we can, to the best of our ability, promote this opportunity to potential applicants working and living in areas that are most disproportionately impacted by climate change and health inequities. Second, that these deliverables will guide our application review process so that we can again prioritize applications coming from those highly impacted areas. And third, that they will help us identify examples of community-driven actions from which the network can learn and that it can uplift as promising practices. We are striving to make the application to become a network member as accessible and convenient to complete as possible. We plan to have a primary application of a written online application, making use of user-friendly survey software with responsive design. And we are hoping to be able to make this application available in multiple languages. We also plan to offer a verbal application by request, which would be taken over the phone and transcribed. We are considering this verbal application as a secondary option to better meet the needs of applicants who may have limited access to broadband. We do recognize that we will need to think creatively about how to get the word out about this secondary option, and we look forward to hearing your ideas in the upcoming discussion portion of this session. We are also striving to craft an equitable and transparent application review strategy that will allow us to identify a set of network members who are collectively diverse, regionally representative, and stand to benefit the most from engaging in the network. We are currently scoping a multi-stage review process involving a largely internal review team with potentially external advisors. The stages currently are scoped as follows. First, an eligibility screen, which would ensure that applicants meet the baseline qualifications. Next, we would preliminarily sort applications so that we can prioritize applicants applying from areas that are most negatively impacted by climate change and related health inequities. This sorting and scoring would be guided by the UMD deliverables. Then, the applications will be holistically evaluated by the review team using a standardized rubric to assess the preferred qualifications that get at relevant skills and experience, as well as individual and organizational capacity to engage in the network. The final step would be a meeting with the review team to discuss and select the finalists, followed by an ask to the finalists to share a letter of endorsement and support from their organization. After that, a letter of acceptance would be sent to selected members. Lastly, we want to share a high-level timeline of how we're hoping the planning and implementation process for the Climate Communities Network will progress. We are currently here in December 2022 holding this public listening session, the feedback from which we will take back and apply to our current plans, including the member recruitment and selection approach. We hope to be able to open and promote applications in January 2023, close them in February, and review them into March. By late March, we hope to be able to select members, confirm strategic partners, and officially launch the network. Once the network is launched, early priorities will include co-developing the network's charter, mission, vision, and values, solidifying the network structure and governance, determining the network's work plan, and integrating network members across the Climate Grand Challenge. With that, we will conclude our presentation and move into the best part of this session, the discussion and feedback section. We want to thank you all for your attention, and we also want to take a moment to offer a sincere thanks to our sponsor, the JPB Foundation, for making this work possible. So just to frame this next section, we're planning to facilitate the discussion and feedback section by alternating between calling on those who want to share verbally and those who are contributing in the chat. For those of you who'd like to share verbally, when the time comes, kindly use the Zoom hand raise function, and we'll do our best to call on you in the order in which you put up your hand. When you are called, please introduce yourself by sharing your name, and if you wish, your organization. You can also turn on your camera if you'd like to. We do ask that you try to keep comments, suggestions, and questions to around a minute or so, just so we can get to as many people as possible. We'll also do our best to bring as many unique contributors into the conversation as possible. And finally, we welcome people to continue using Zoom reactions to indicate support for others' contributions. Just so you all know, our team is here taking notes in the background, and the session is being recorded. So rest assured that all of your feedback is being noted, even if we're not able to hear from you directly. We are going to structure the discussion section into 3 buckets with a few question prompts for each topic. And we'll spend around 10 to 15 minutes in each bucket discussing the questions before moving to the next topic. We wanted to do a quick poll to determine which topic you all would like to dive into first. The topics are, as you see on the screen, recruitment approach and scope, program benefits, and member engagement. So I'll give folks a few moments to navigate back to Slido if you need to, using the instructions on the screen. And go ahead and cast your votes. Tell us what topic you would like to dive into first. Wait a few more seconds here to see how these shake out. Looks like we got 17 people contributing. Let's try to get that number just a little higher, considering we got 144 of us on the line. We'd love to hear from all of you, or a majority of you if we can. So I'll wait 30 more seconds. All right. I think we will go ahead just in the interest of time and call it there. It looks like member engagement crept ahead. Oh, we're back to a tie. We know we're going to start though with recruitment, approach, and scope. And then it looks like we can move to program benefits and finally to member engagement. So Fumi, I'm going to go ahead and kick it to you to start us off with our first bucket, recruitment, approach, and scope.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I just realized some people were voting in the chat. So hopefully recruitment approach and scope is still of interest for us to sort of jump in and tackle first. And we will spend about 10 to 15 minutes discussing this topic. So we wanted to sort of open up the floor to you all. I know there were some questions that have already come through in the chat. If you wouldn't mind reposting those, or if you feel compelled to contribute verbally, that'd be great. But we wanted to ask initially, are there any questions or considerations for our eligibility criteria as is? As a reminder, we're using data from the UMB deliverables as a resource for applicant outreach and selection. So really looking at that regional landscape assessment to help guide sort of how we promote, what communities we promote to. And so just really wanted to get insight from you all, expertise from you all on are the eligibility criteria clear? Are there any questions or considerations for us? And then also, as we think about promoting the opportunity, do you have any thoughts there? So again, feel free to use the chat, feel free to raise your hand, and we will start to call on people shortly. I cannot see any hands raised right now, but it could just be me. Okay, I see Debbie. So should be able to unmute.
Good morning. My question is with regard to the second bullet on your baseline qualifications, specifically that the organization must be focused on addressing climate-related health inequities. Is that a central focus, like a primary focus for the organization on climate-related health inequities, or could such a focus be one of many that an organization has? How explicit do you need the organization's focus to be?
That's a great question. As long as they have some focus on climate-related health inequities, just working at that intersection, that's something we've talked about. That is something that we are open to. Of course, we want this program to be focused specifically at the intersection of climate change and health equity. But if there are other focuses, we know that's not uncommon. And so as we've been sort of looking at organizations, adding them to our database and for future outreach, current outreach, that's something that we've talked about, and it's not off the table or anything like that, but it does need to be a focus. Thank you. I'm trying to scan the chat. Names of this initiative. Grace, did you want to take the next question in the chat?
Yes, I am scanning to thank you all so much for your contributions. I think one of the earliest questions related to this, to the bucket that we are in, was talking about ensuring adequate representation among the applicants from Indigenous communities in the U.S. and noting the short timeline to recruit. Definitely very much appreciate this comment and question. And it is something that is very top of mind for us. I think that we are working we are trying very hard to gather as much feedback as we can about ways in which to promote this opportunity specifically to communities that we know are impacted by multiple indicators of climate change and also these indirect and direct health effects. And so Indigenous communities and are top of our list to make sure that we are reaching out to and promoting this opportunity appropriately. We're cognizant that the timeline as scoped can feel very short, and that is why many of the plans that we're presenting to you all today are not set in stone. And so feedback like this is really helpful to understand that if we want to be able to promote this opportunity and actually reach the applicants who both are most impacted and have some of the most solutions to share, that we might need to consider being more flexible and expansive with our time. And we also would welcome folks to chime in verbally or in the chat if you have specific promotion or outreach techniques that have worked well for you for reaching certain communities in the past. Fumi, do you have anything you'd want to add there?
No, I think you covered it. I just sort of jumping back to the initial question, I saw a question in the chat about would you be willing to consider organizations with a health equity focus, but not necessarily expertise and mission on climate change? I just wanted to, since it was so closely related to the first question, wanted to clarify that we are explicitly looking at organizations that do have a focus on climate change and addressing related health inequities. But to reiterate the answer to the first question, it does not need to be that that organization only works on climate change and health equity. So just wanted to clarify that. And I see another hand raised. Chris Patrick, if you like to unmute and share.
Yeah, so I was actually kind of going back to that original question of how you're recruiting and engaging Indigenous communities, because I'm located in Flagstaff, Arizona, working at Northern Arizona University. We're kind of in the Four Corners region next to Navajo Nation. And we do a lot of recruitment, specifically in the Indigenous populations. And we have a couple of organizations here on campus that engages Indigenous tribal environmental professionals that might be interested in joining the Climate Communities Network. But my specific question was the stakeholder qualifications.
The
Strategic partner, potentially. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'll jump in. I was going to say, did you mean to say strategic partner qualification?
Yes, sorry, strategic partner.
Gotcha. If we could go back to that slide. Sorry, we are trying to navigate.
Give me one moment here.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to want to go past the Slido, so I'm just going to escape out of screen share for a moment or escape out of full view and go back to strategic partner qualifications. Current slide. Thanks all for your patience.
And so you guys are also recruiting for strategic partners, and I believe it was mentioned that multi-sector academia is also welcomed in there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I just wanted a clarifying question on that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the question. I see some additional stuff in the chat. So I'll kick it over to you, Grace, to take the next chat question, if you can find them. Let me know, I can read it out if you.
No problem. If you see one right on hand, feel free. I'm just scrolling through. I want to do a quick clarification. Mona S. from Medical Consortium asked for clarification on UMD deliverables. Thank you for that question. UMD is an acronym for the University of Maryland. So that's just in reference to those deliverables that we talked about guiding our recruitment approach and review process. So the literature review, some mapping exercises, and case studies. Let's see. And then I have a question from Chris, asking to clarify the aims of the initiative with some additional background and asking to concretize the mission of the group. I know, Fumi, I'm happy to take this question. We could also put in our parking lot for a later bucket. What would you prefer?
We can do parking lot.
Okay. Thank you for the question though, Chris.
Yes.
I'm just looking to see if there's anything that might be a little more related to this bucket for now.
Yes, if you want, I can read the question out. So from Savannah, I know we are on member section, hoping you could differentiate the roles of members and strategic partners. Do strategic partners also need to apply? Is there a timeline for applications if so?
Great. Thank you, Savannah, for that question. And I just happened to be at this slide earlier in the deck, which might be helpful as a visual. This is a really good question. So differentiating the roles of members and strategic partners. So the members are really our core group of participants within this network. They are community leaders working for community-based organizations, whereas the strategic partners are individuals who are working for governmental and non-governmental organizations that are well positioned to be able to leverage their resources to support and advance the community leaders' goals. Members do need to apply. Strategic partners will be invited to serve, but given the and they will have similar expectations and similar benefits, but we do expect a higher level engagement from members, including developing and implementing the work plan for the climate communities network. And then I see a timeline for applications. If so, the timeline for applications from members is likely opening in January of the new year. And then outreach for the strategic partners could begin as soon as late December and January, but the strategic partners would be confirmed once the network is launched. I hope that answers your question. More than happy to give more clarification too.
Thank you, Grace. And I'll just add really quickly that that's part of what we want to hear from you all. So if there are organizations or individuals that you feel you should reach out to about this opportunity to either apply to be network members or organizations that would be a good fit, in your opinion, to serve as strategic partners, please let us know. You can put them in the chat. The survey that we'll be sending afterwards, we'll have a question on that. And so we are open to those recommendations, and we really want you all to contribute so can help inform our decisions. So I will turn back to the raised hands really quickly. I see Jerry, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question.
Sure. Dr. Jerry Abraham from Climate Health Now here in South Los Angeles. And just a couple concerns I wanted to raise. One, I'm worried that 12 might be too small a number, just given the diversity, variety, all of the inclusivity that we want to really reflect. I'm wondering if there are ways to better organize that group, if you needed a steering committee or more of a dedicated, like maybe leadership or executive team within there. But I could see, just like several other National Academy of Medicine groups that are much larger, you really want to make sure, just like the actual National Academy of Medicine Action Collaborative is much larger and reflects the breadth of those involved in the health sector, I think this group should as well. The second piece that I would really want to see prioritized is that I feel like sometimes the people on the steering committee right now are at very high levels, and then it sounds like we're going to the very grassroots. But in between there, I think that we need to think about the health workers, health professionals, and what role will they play and how are they reflected? Because I don't think they're always represented through those sitting on the steering committee, and they may not be full-time workers of a climate organization. And so, but we know that doctors, nurses, health professionals will play a critical role in educating the public, patients, and also being a part of the entire movement as we decarbonize the health sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were great points. Yeah, and we've talked a bit about both points that you raised in terms of the network size. So, especially given that we want to compensate members, we want to compensate them as adequately as possible. And we do have, a question on that in one of the other sections about program benefits, but thinking about the capacity of our team and our, what we say we want to commit to the network members, we definitely are considering sort of bandwidth, the ability to compensate. And, initially we had just talked about selecting more network members, just again, to get at the inclusivity and diversity that you were talking about, but just trying, it's like that balance between, timing and funding and our staff bandwidth. So, but point well taken. and just in terms of like that in between with the grassroots and the leadership level, definitely a good piece of feedback for us to take back. So thank you. So the chat has gotten a little bit more active. Trying to see. Oh,
What
sorry,
just
Grace,
saying?
you have something to add? Sorry.
Just one thing, as I'm keeping my timekeeper duties on top of mine too. We may want to offer folks a chance to chime in on the other question in this section, but just so we have time to get to the other buckets as well. But all of the chat is fantastic. I'm also seeing lots of suggestions for organizations to reach out to and collaborate with. So all of these comments in the chat are going to be noted.
Yes, thank you all. And yes, second what Grace just said. So, oh, we have another question in this section. So thanks for the time check. Okay, so we'll shift to the second question under recruitment approach and scope. So Grace had shared the two different formats that we are currently considering for the application, to make the application available. Are there other ways that the NAM can modify the application format to be more accessible, inclusive? So we have the written online application, hoping to have responsive design, and that be translated into different languages for those who need that. And then we are hoping to also offer a verbal application upon request, particularly thinking about those who might be in areas with limited broadband access. And so these applications would be taken over the phone and transcribed. And so there's a number of considerations that we've talked about, but just want to hear from you all. Grace, could you go back to the question slide, please? Just to make sure I'm asking it right. Yes, just other ways that you feel we can modify the application format to make it more accessible, or if you have thoughts about the two formats that we're currently considering. So I see a hand raised. I don't see anything in the chat about this question yet, but and I don't know, Jaron, I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. The one question I have is regarding demographics and specifically students and Gen Z, and whether this application could be extended to that growing demographic where, you know, they're more likely, and I'm more likely to apply through different types of mediums. That's something you've considered at all?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. You're asking if there are opportunities to engage students and like Gen Z?
Students in general, yeah, who are like, you know, I work for an organization that is directly, whose mission is directly geared towards addressing social determinants of health, but at the same time, you know, if you're looking at a larger applicant pool or more higher quality applicants, there's, you know, just some feedback. I think that the traditional routes may not resonate as well with certain demographics. So I think they certainly will help you to connect with those that are underrepresented, which is phenomenal. And I just was wondering if there's any thoughts put into, like, you know, the way that organizations are most effectively connecting with the emerging generation, the emerging leaders that are mostly within Gen Z, and it's typically like, yeah, some thoughts, and curious if you had any feedback.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great point. We have talked about this as well. One of the things that it actually was one of the initial things we talked about. And part of the reason why it wasn't on the slide, but our eligibility criteria is the age, I guess, is 18 and up, because we definitely do want to be as expansive as possible in terms of like age groups that are represented with this network as well. I think our main thing was making sure that individuals are connected to organizations that are able to sort of help support the work of the network. And so we talked about sort of the preferred qualifications for these organizations, but we really do want there to be that climate change and health equity focus. But in terms of age, we are open to and seeking, you know, a broad range of ages for this network. And if you do have like helpful strategies or outlets that or channels that we could be using to reach those groups, definitely please let us know. We're open to that for sure. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. So Grace, how are we doing on time? Do we need to move to the second? I feel like we need to move to the second category.
We may need to. I'm cognizant that this was the topic that the most people wanted to discuss. So I'm just scanning to see if there's any other, and I apologize if I'm missing some of your all's fabulous questions and comments in the chat. This is an excellently active chat. There was a question, Fumi, about there's a lot of interest in climate and health. So many people are on this call today. And again, I think going back to Dr. Jerry's point about only planning to select 12 members for this at this time, asking about plans for involvement of people not selected as members. And I'm assuming also not who wouldn't be serving as strategic partners. And I think we can say that we would love to be able to collaborate and build a community with as many interested and passionate people and organizations as possible. So I think while we don't have specific plans yet, besides being able to continue engaging with you all and opening up continuing channels of communication and also shared learning, that is very much on our minds, and we don't want this to be the end of this engagement. We want this to be the beginning of an ongoing conversation and collaboration. So I think kind of keep a lookout for how we might be able to meaningfully involve people outside of the members that we're supporting and selecting. Fumi, do you have anything to add to that? And thank you, Kirk, for this question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And my only addition would be, if you have any suggestions or recommendations, let us know. There's a lot to consider here, and you all are raising really great points. And so just thank you again for the question. And if you do have also like examples, resources, models that have worked well for you and your organization, please let us know. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. We have about 20-ish minutes left, and we want to give time to the other sections. So I will move us along to program benefits. Grace, did you want to kick off this piece?
Absolutely. I think program benefits came in tied with member engagement. So we'll try to give equal time to both of these buckets, spending around 10 minutes discussing. So our first question is beyond the existing program benefits, which I'll share again in a moment. If you all have ideas for other incentives and opportunities that the NAM might consider providing. So let me go ahead and flash to the benefits and just reiterate or mention that we will also be financially compensating members. And so I want you all to be able to have a chance to take a look at the benefits here. And then I'll flash back to the slide with the question in a moment and welcome any contributions. Don't see any hand raised yet on my side. Let's see. Dr. Jerry, I see you. I want to see if anyone else who we might not have heard from yet has anything they want to chime in verbally. I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Jerry.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's definitely a double-edged sword, because if you don't offer some sort of compensation or incentive, then it really attracts those who may be well-resourced already that can participate. But then if you offer incentives, then that also may become a motivation or driver of who participates, and becomes the ends itself as well. I'm participating in order to complete the requirements in order to fulfill and get this incentive. And so I'm not sure what the balancing act is there, but I think there are lots of good examples where we definitely prioritize and invite and involve those who may not be well-resourced, but also understand there may be organizations and other stakeholders that don't need that kind of support and should forego actually being offered that type of incentive. So really a hybrid and understanding that heterogeneity of the people you actually want in this group.
That is really, really helpful consideration to put forward, that the double-edged, or I think the balancing act, as you named it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that feedback. Seeing anything come through in the chat, Fumi?
No, I'm not. I was thinking we could go to the next question if there isn't, if there are any new hands raised or comments in the chat.
That sounds good. All right. So secondly, on this program benefits slide, we do intend, right, we are planning to compensate the network members. So does anyone, and with the considerations that have been raised, but right now the intention is to compensate the network members. So those community leaders working for the CBOs, the community-based organizations in areas disproportionately impacted by climate change. And so with that in mind, we would really welcome any wisdom or experience that you all could share of examples of best practices for equitable models of financial compensation in efforts that are involved in community engagement. If you all have any experience or any great examples or models to share, we would really be open to hearing those.
I see your hand, Jerry.
Okay. Don't need to chime in too much, but I was just going to say, rather could you offer it as scholarships, grants, or stipends, and have it as a need-based almost, and somehow protect anonymity of those that received that type of support. And so create a way that you can say, I need that assistance, and then also allow people who have other means of being supported to use those avenues. That way you really can encourage folks to ask for help, not be really publicly identified for it, and we make sure they come to the table.
That is something that we kind of sort of talked about, but not to the extent that you just raised. So I wrote that down. That's a really great consideration. Yeah, we definitely will need to make decisions soon, and so this is this is perfect. And so I will jump to a question in the chat from Amanda. Thank you. Will there be opportunities to have the members share what they would want most from participating beyond compensation? Yes. There, a lot of these plans we're putting in place, we're drafting, we're gathering as much feedback as we can prior to selecting network members, but the goal is to really finalize things once network members have been selected. And so we do plan on asking them what they want out of this opportunity. And we're hoping to even craft the application itself in a way that sort of asks that question up front. So we already have an idea of what we might need to prepare to offer the network members, the ones who've been selected. So that's something we've talked about. Definitely want to make sure that this is beneficial for everyone involved and that it's equitable. And so that's why we really, if there are any helpful resources, that'd be super great if you all could share those. But we do plan to give network members the opportunity to inform how this program is disseminated and implemented. So, and that includes benefits and compensation, because we have heard that it'd be a good idea to ask network members as well, like how they would like to receive financial compensation. There's different methods of dissemination. They have pros and cons. And so really getting into those details and trying to solidify things after network members have come on. I don't see any additional hands raised. I'm seeing comments in the chat. It looks like a question just came in. Grace, did you want to take this one from, I think that's the most recent question from Donald.
Donald, let us see. This is focused on membership and application process. Will we have time to raise other policy issues on this call? I'm just reading your context, Donald. Thank you for sending this in. Significant community focus on that. I want to make sure I'm understanding this question. It seems like I'm going to read it to myself one more time so I can try to reflect it back to you, Donald. You can offer me context if I'm misunderstanding communities. It seems like Donald might be asking about how the community experts that we'll be bringing in on as members might be hearing like having their voices and perspectives integrated into the larger Grand Challenge so that the different people working within the Grand Challenge can be hearing from one another, and whether that is going to happen. And Donald, please feel free to chime in or message in the chat if you have additional context. It's definitely the intention and large purpose of the Climate Communities Network to have the community members who come on as members to be fully integrated into the Grand Challenge as co-creators and participants. So they would be, talking with other, experts like themselves, other experts on the Climate Grand Challenge to inform the direction and outcomes of this overall project. So they would be integrated into advancing those strategic objectives that Dr. Zhao spoke about earlier. So looking at the communication issue of climate as a public health issue, looking at which systems need to be transformed and how, looking at decarbonizing the health sector, which is a large part of the Climate Grand Challenge currently, and also looking at research and innovation for climate and health equity. We envision the members coming on and being able to directly contribute to and drive those objectives and be in conversation with the other people involved in the Grand Challenge. I hope that answers your question, and please do feel free to follow up in the chat.
Okay.
Any other hands or comments you see coming through, Fumi?
I don't see, okay, so there's a okay.
Bingo.
There's a couple of hands raised, so we can turn our attention there, and then there was something in the chat that I had flagged to sort of address after, but
Okay.
we can shift to Jaren. You want to? That's the first hand I see.
That's what I see.
Sure. As it relates to equitable models, I think that, if you want fair representation across the board, it would be really great to have an ecosystem or a community flywheel of sorts with partners, nonprofits, other groups that can support members more broadly and act as mentors or sponsors. I think that's a really important way to ensure that you're providing the most impact to those who are joining.
Thank you. That is something that we had not talked about, and so thank you for that contribution and that feedback. Definitely, we'll take that back. The plan is to, take all this feedback and make our plans hopefully better, and then keep you all posted as things progress. So the one thing I just wanted to flag in the chat really quickly before we go back to the raised hands was there was another comment just sort of reiterating the concern about 12 community organizations, and I did we the number we're currently hoping to select up to 12, recognizing that that may not be enough, but wanted to just reiterate that this is, it's a pilot. It's our first time doing this. We're really excited about it and hoping to be as inclusive as possible with the final number of members that we do end up selecting. But as we mentioned in the beginning, this is an initiative that we hope to continue. And so we're hoping that there will be opportunities to broaden our reach with this program. So just wanted to flag that. And so shifting back to this will probably be our last question for this section. So shifting back to the raised hand, Donald, if you want to unmute and ask your question, and then we'll transition to our last topic. I think you're still muted. I don't know. Okay.
Well, let me know if this is an appropriate time to fit in your schedule. My raised hand went back to the previous comments we've had through my chat. this is in regards to one of your objectives of informing the bigger policies and the directions of the Grand Challenge. I want, thanks for doing this initiative. The idea of having a climate community is wonderful. In that context, the climate community that you're inviting to listen to includes a very strong finance-related community. Specifically, there is a growing movement for fossil fuel divestment. And the health sector has been very absent from that discussion. So our campaign, as well as many others, are trying to get health sector leadership. And the reason for that is that, as Dr. Zhao pointed out, the healthcare sector has a very large carbon footprint, but in all of its accounting, it has ignored the emissions implications of its massive financial investments through pension funds and so forth. I sent a link in the chat, which was a small sampling done by done of the financial records of 6 local hospitals in Boston, analyzed their financial investments on the front end, and concluded through those investments that the carbon footprint of those investments are 3 times larger than their operational emissions. And I circle back to the NAM's Grand Challenge and Dr. Zhao's specific call to action for the healthcare to decarbonize, which is an absolute necessary initiative. Nothing about that must change. All of those things must continue, and what you're doing must continue. But all of it ignores the financial investments made upfront by our own institutions. So I'm just injecting this into the conversation as you move forward. Remember that this is part of the climate community, that we can do only so much mitigation while we're continuing on the front end. I'll leave you all with this, and thanks for indulging me on this. 2 months ago, our campaign sent a petition. You could all look it up. I'll send the link. We sent a petition, an open petition, to the National Academy. It was signed by 75,000 people, calling on the Academy leadership to include fossil fuel divestment within the existing very strong decarbonization program. We await their response. I leave it.
Thank you very much, Donald, for taking the time to share that. Definitely won't be able to get into all of it with the amount of time that we have left. But thanks for sharing that consideration. And, you know, as we mentioned, the goal of the Climate Communities Network is to integrate, you know, across, inform, you know, support the overall Grand Challenge, which is a big and complex initiative in itself. This is a big and complex issue. And so all of this feedback is much appreciated. And it looks like there's some support in the chat. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move us forward to our last piece that we wanted to sort of get everyone's feedback on. We have shared that, I guess it's a nice segue. We've shared that one of the goals of the network is to inform the strategic direction and outcomes of the Climate Grand Challenge. And so as we, you know, take this community focus and we're really trying to operate with the principles of community engagement, what recommendations or promising approaches do you all have for equitable collaboration and shared leadership with community members? Any resources, examples in your own work? Again, want to make sure that we do this well and that we do this to the best of our ability. And that only happens iteratively and with the input from experts and other perspectives. So any thoughts in the chat? Feel free to raise your hand and come off mute as well. We'll give it a couple seconds. I see some helpful resources in the chat. Yes, some comments about looking at the systems level. Yes, definitely want to make systems level changes. And I see a question, I think. So I'll read the question in the chat, and then I think we have a hand raised from Jerry and some more stuff in the chat. So let me start with the question that came in a few minutes ago. What about having institutional membership to include various professional and business organizations, as long as there is firm representatives with tangible and measurable action plans? I'm not sure I understand the question. I think a little bit more context would be helpful. So Sean Pin, I hope I'm saying your name right. If you did want to come off mute or provide some more context in the chat, that would be super helpful. But for now, we can turn it back over to the raised hands. I don't know, Donald, if you still have your hand raised from earlier, but if so, we can move to Jerry to unmute and ask his question.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I think Karen Conway had made that comment of individual members versus institutional members. And so that may be a way of how you engage more people, while an institution may identify a point person, maybe having those institutional memberships may be one way. And then I would say something along the lines of a quarterly or so report out and a clear culminating gathering or virtual event where it is clear there will be some sort of accountability and report out of what has been accomplished so far, and making sure that there is the equivalent of like a public comment or stakeholder engagement comment period. So those that aren't actually a part of the different groups that have been formed can still feel they have a opportunity to make sure that their concerns or perspectives are included.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
It looks like we just saw affirmation that addressed the original question.
Mhm.
It's very, very helpful to have those specific practice examples shared. So thank both of you.
Yes, and thank you all for sharing these links in the chat. It's very helpful. The articles, the resources.
Mm-hmm.
We have like 2 more minutes before we go to closing and key takeaways. So if there's any last minute lingering thoughts, I know you all wanted to hear mostly about recruitment approach and scope. So if there's anything there, any feedback, any considerations, let us know. But as we mentioned, there will be the survey opportunity. So if there's nothing else, can move us along to closing. So thank you, Grace and I, and on behalf of all of us, we do want to thank you all for your time, for your participation, for your passion. This is what we wanted. We will be taking in, reflecting on, and applying all of this feedback as we continue to prepare for our launch in the coming weeks and months. This work can only be done well, as I mentioned, if it's done thoughtfully, iteratively, and in true collaboration and partnership. And so we're, bringing utmost humility to this space. And thank you all just so much for being here and taking the time to share your expertise with us today. We know it's going to make this initiative all the more impactful. Please note that a follow-up email with a recording of the session today, our slides, as well as that survey we've been mentioning is forthcoming. And so again, the survey, you can share any additional feedback via that survey. You can share that survey with others that you feel need to contribute or should contribute. Please share the survey with others that you feel their perspectives would be valuable. The survey will include not only the questions that we discussed today, but additional ones. And so there will be opportunity to contribute to other aspects of the program, as well as provide additional feedback on some of the questions from today. Please fill out the survey if you're able to, and share with your networks. The survey, as I mentioned, will also include space for you all to recommend specific individuals and organizations that we should reach out to about the opportunity, either to apply to be a network member or a strategic partner. And so that survey will close at the end of this month. That's the current intention. And so there'll be a couple of weeks for you all to respond to that. Please know that we are going to also follow up with you all when applications go live. We will share information about how to promote the opportunity and how to apply. Again, thank you all. And just one last thing, we wanted to be sure that you all don't miss any updates from the Climate Communities Network. So you can sign up for our mailing list. I believe it was put in the chat earlier. We can repost that if possible. But if you haven't already signed up for our mailing list, you can use the link on the slide, the link that's in the chat to go to the website, fill out the form, and check climate change and human health. We will also share this link in our follow-up materials, so no worries if you aren't able to get to it right now. And so at any point in time, between now and even post-launch, we can be reached at climatecommunities@nas.edu. So if you have questions, feedback, concerns, please reach out to us. We welcome ongoing conversation and opportunities to collaborate and learn more from each other. And so with that, it seems like we will close. We have a couple minutes to spare. So thank you all again, and we look forward to being in touch again soon.